Alright, so this is Fortress Rabaul, mission number 2. It's going to be a medium bomber strike, 7 medium bombers, 7 P-38s. I got the low-level guys flying altitude 0. They're going to be rolling in on the airfields on Rabaul. They're using parafrags and strafing. So these are the B-25D strafers with the heavy gun package. Then we have the B-25Cs that are going to be flying at altitude 7. And the reason we're doing that is because the cloud cover is at altitude 7. That's going to give them a little bit of cover from the flak that's going to be over the target. But the target itself is clear of clouds. So that's why I decided to set them up that way. And I've staggered the escorts. I don't have any sweepers this time. Instead, I decided to have them all as escorts streaming above the low-level bombers. Tried to put them midway between the low and the high so that this group can respond to either threat. Obviously, responding to this threat is much easier than you know, if they get set free of their escort duties with this group, they potentially could assist any A6M5s that come and attack these guys. 3 high cover escorts, and that's the situation there. The interceptors, they can only go as far as column N at altitude 12. So what I've decided to do, instead of making these guys interceptors, I've made them on cap. So there's 2 wings on cap. High level cap there at altitude 12, and I position them according to projected movement of the American bomber stream. So that's what these dice are. I just kind of figure out, okay, it's going to be turn 2, they'll be there, turn 3, turn 4, turn 5, and so forth. That helps me kind of plan how I'm going to have my interceptors climb to meet them and be in position. So I'm hoping that these guys, the Japanese interceptors on cap at high level, will be able to go after the fighters. I want to wreck this fighter formation, and then the goal then becomes, will these guys be able to get at the bombers unmolested, or will this fighter squadron be able to climb in time in order to meet some bombers that are now unescorted because the other formations have been deranged by fighter attacks. Basically, I want to pick on these guys as much as possible, and also have this group be able to pick at the low-level guys as well. They're also going to be on cap, so they're not going to be moving. They're just going to be circling in place. In turn 8, we got another 2 squadrons of A65s that are going to be coming in. We're going to bring them in, I think, on altitude, or excuse me, columns E or F. They just can't be adjacent to any other aircraft streams. So they can probably go after any of the guys that are already going to hit the airfield. They're not going to be able to prevent the bombing of the airfield, but they might be able to inflict some serious casualties. And my goal now isn't so much to hit the bombers as it is to hit the fighters. I think the Japanese need to go after the fighters, keep the attrition working in their favor, force the Americans to either not send a raid or to send an unescorted raid. That's kind of my goal in this, because I think the airfield's going to take crippling damage. There's already 8 hits on it. If they take another 16, that would be crippling damage, which is going to push the fighter track on the Japanese 1 more box, making it harder for the Japanese to send up aircraft in the future. It also gives them 2 campaign victory points. So the goal of the Americans, I believe, is to get up to 7. I think it's 7 victory points or more is American victory. 5 or 6 is a draw. 4 or less is a Japanese victory. There is a way for the Japanese to push that track backwards. But one of the things that has hurt the Japanese is there was a 1 chance in 6 that there'd be good weather on turn 2, and so the weather track did not move. It just stayed in place. And so that's very unfortunate, because that's going to cause, you know, more wear and tear on the Japanese defenders and allow the Americans to keep sending guys after those air bases, racking up points and not wasting turns where they can't raid or choose not to raid. So I think if you get an opportunity to do a raid and you can get at least 1 campaign victory point, that's going to put you in a really good place. So that's the setup here for mission number 2 of the campaign, Fortress Rabaul. So we'll take a look and we'll see how this campaign then works out. Okay, mission number 2 is in the books. This is Fortress Rabaul, the campaign from Wing Leader. This time we did a medium bomber raid on the airfields on New Britain. The results of it were Americans took 3 fighter losses, but they inflicted quite a few on the Japanese. Now initially it didn't look that way. The Japanese had very good initial success against the P-38s. But they ended up losing several fighters toward the end as they tried to press their advantages against the bombers. So they took a total of 11 losses in this mission. That was from this mission. These were from earlier. So we're going to consolidate those in just a minute. Whereas in mission 1, only 1 B-24 was lost, 5 B-25s were lost. So that's a significant amount of damage to the bomber fleet. But the airfield was absolutely pummeled, receiving fatal damage. That's going to score 2 campaign victory points. It's also going to move the fighter track toward the goose egg point. So overall, this was an American win, but the fighters did take some losses again. So the fighter track's going to move one more time, but the fighters are still going to be able to maintain a flotilla to defend the heavies on another sortie for a future mission. So the Japanese are in real trouble. I initially thought that I'd screwed up with the Americans as I'd set up my bomber streams with way too many escorts. It would have been better to have some sweeps. I was very fortunate in how a lot of the Japanese hits just turned out to be stragglers. They scored a lot of hits, so I ended up with a lot of stragglers that they weren't able to finish off. And the Japanese fighters broke early in a number of engagements, and so couldn't really push their early advantage against the fighters. And then I really went hard against the bombers, but they really paid for it. It might have been better if the Japanese had gone harder against the P-38s and left the bombers alone, perhaps. I don't know. It's hard to say. So we'll see how things pan out. Overall, things have been going to the Americans' advantage, especially with the weather track not moving. And the Japanese need to be able to defend their targets a little bit better. The flak actually did more damage, I think, than anything else. And it looked initially like the airfield was going to escape getting fatal damage, but only one of the B-25s scored really big, I think they rolled like a 10, and a natural 10. There was a veteran squadron, and then they were using parafrags. So that combination really put some damage on those airfields. So just keep pounding those airfields away and racking up points, and at some point we'll have to shift focus to the naval side of things. That's where the Japanese can push the victory points back. So the CVPs are going to go up to 3 now. So Japanese might not be able to win this one, but they can force things out to a draw, which is a win of sorts, I think, as the Japanese. I think anything less than American victory is actually a Japanese victory in this particular scenario, or campaign, as I should say. So that is the outcome of mission number 2. We'll see what happens from here.